Tony, I won't be using the PowerPoint this morning. Oh, it's on. That's awesome. I won't be using PowerPoint, but there's a fountain free is Song of Invitation. Good morning. I'll be honest, my plan was to get up here in the dark and the first thing I say be "Let there be light" in hopes that it would come on. So either the Lord or the linemen have robbed me of the coolest moment and story ever because they beat me to the punch by a few minutes. But it's good. It's good to have the lights back on. It's good for the blessing to be together and have the heat back going again. What we're going to talk about this morning, at first glance, isn't all that fitting, but at second glance, it couldn't fit more perfectly. Isaiah chapter 3. We've been in this study of understanding the beginning of Isaiah to better understand his call of "Here am I, send me." And in the middle of Isaiah 3, 4, and 5, you have a promise of God's coming judgment. And you may be asking, well, God's coming judgment, what does that have to do with anything that we're going through right now? No, I don't think the snow is any kind of God's coming judgment. I think it's a reminder that our God is in control. I think it's a reminder that He's in control of the changing of the seasons. But what does tie in, I think, pretty perfectly, or at least it has for me for the last probably week and a half, is very, very similar to God's judgment. There's a choice in response, I think. There's a choice in response, and it's one that we've actually witnessed pretty well for the last week and a half or so. Because whenever, at the beginning, I guess, of the week before last, when you got on your social media and you saw 100 different predictions of what was supposed to happen. You know, we were going to get 2 inches of snow, and then 16, and then 12, and then 4, and then it was going to be all this ice, but then no ice, but then more ice again. And, you know, I remember it was Monday night, so the Monday, the entire week before, I was standing in line at the Piggly Wiggly, and they were talking about if they had enough bread or not, and he was like, "Oh yeah, we're good on bread." So I don't know if you got bread from there or not, but he said they were good up there on bread for this whole last week, preparing for everybody storming. I watched throughout that week before the last week that we've experienced, and it seemed like the two different responses were either chaos or clarity. It seemed like the two different responses were either chaos or clarity. Interestingly enough, that's the two most common responses to God's judgment and Jesus coming back. For one group of people, it's going to be chaos. For another group of people, the thought of it is actually peace providing clarity. And whenever you look through and whenever you think about it, you think about the people that respond, the questions that course through our minds as we've had all of these different creature comforts that have piled up over the last 100 years. And honestly, they've only been around for the last 100 years. The more of them that have piled up, the more of them that we've acclimated to, the more of them that we've gotten used to, and the more of them that we've depended on, the easier it is to send us into a spiral when they're taken from us. My position on electric vehicles will stand with the last week. The more creature comforts that we have amassed, the easier it is to send us into chaos as they're pulled and taken from us. I want you to imagine, and Mr. Bobby actually referenced it in announcements this morning, I want you to imagine 60 years ago, which keep in mind, that would be, carry the one, that'd be 1960, that would not be 1940, I'm sorry. It'd be 1965 actually. Imagine in 1965, you sat a group of people down and said, "Listen, there's not going to be electricity, and the water pressure is going to go down a little bit, and the roads are going to be icy, and you're not going to have electric heat, and you might not have a way to the store, and you might have to just eat what's in your house." And they all said, "Okay, so like the way we grew up?" They're like, "Okay, so you mean the way I was raised is what we're going to experience for a week." 60 years isn't that long of a time. But it's interesting how you see when faced with something big like that, it's either chaos for some or clarity. And I can't help but notice how similar of a response that we have when it comes to God's judgment. Because I was anticipating the power to be out and it to be cold and getting colder in here, I've already shortened this sermon, so you're going to be the benefactor of that, even though that we have heat again. So we're not going to dive into all these, but I want us to walk through really quickly and look through the book of Isaiah and see how for Isaiah it was actually the coming of God's judgment was a moment of clarity, not just a moment of chaos. I think the reason why we have a hard time talking about God's judgment and the reason why you hear, preacher, you're preaching on God's judgment like on a Sunday morning. Why not in a sermon about the opportunities that we're going to have over the next few weeks to serve people, and those are going to be there. Why not encouragement about weathering storms because of what we've just got through? Those are there in those life lessons we've walked through. Why something that's so difficult and so hard and so harsh as God's judgment? Well, it's actually not that difficult, and it's not that harsh, and it's not that hard from the perspective of somebody who's prepared for it and from the perspective of somebody whose God's judgment brings clarity. God's judgment was not designed to bring about chaos within His people. We're actually supposed to have a very different response. It's something that actually makes things make sense, and I've noticed over the last week, isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting when it comes to clarity, how quickly we figured out what actually mattered to us? When all of the extracurriculars were canceled, when all of the things that were optional no longer happened, but the things that mattered to us, taking care of our families, taking time for our faith, it was actually a really clarifying moment for me about what was most important to us and what wasn't all that important. And maybe if it was a moment for clarity for you too, it would have reminded us of how sadly we spend our most time, most effort, and most energy on all of those optional things that don't matter. And we actually have to have everything shut down for us to spend the adequate amount of time on the things that do matter. What if it was a moment of clarity? What if God's judgment wasn't designed to be something that made us lose our minds and panic and rush? And what if it was something that's supposed to give us this blissful deep breath of realizing and resetting of what actually matters in this life and what doesn't? And that's what the book of Isaiah does. In the midst of Isaiah 3 and 4, he's walking through his judgment that's going to be poured out on his people. Here's some of the clarities that God's judgment gives us about our lives. Verse 8 of Isaiah chapter 3. For Jerusalem has stumbled, and Judah has fallen, because their speech and their deeds are against the Lord, defying His glorious presence. The first bit of clarity, not chaos, but the first bit of clarity that God's judgment reminds us is whenever we stumble and whenever we sin and whenever we mess up, it's not just against ourselves, it's not just against the person that we wronged, but it's actually directly against God Himself. There's some clarity there. And the reason why that's important is because sometimes when people think about God's judgment and God stepping in to be the judge, they're thinking, well, God, what part do you have in any of this? I didn't wrong you, I wronged them. I didn't wrong you, I committed this against myself. I want you to imagine, because some of you have had a lot of kids cooped up in a house for far too long this past week. I want you to imagine one of those moments where, let's say, you're 8-year-old or your 9-year-old, that's the socially acceptable age, but we're also going to include your 14-year-old and your 15-year-old too, because they've done the the wick is burning low with each other and their patience. That was a fuzz. And they end up, lashing out, and one hits the other, and they realize what they've done instantly. And so as the tears start to well up and they start to run and go and tell Mom, the other one's trying to stop them like, no, hit me back. Quick, hit me back. Don't tell them even the score. Right? I'm right here, please. Don't tell Mom and Dad. I want you to imagine that exact same scenario, but instead of your sibling, the moment that you boiled everything up and you lashed out and you hit your sibling, you blinked, and it was no longer your sibling, it was your father. Uh-oh. Everything's just changed and everything's just shifted. But Dad, I promise I wasn't hitting you. I thought I was hitting them. But you hit me. I promise if I had known that it was you, I would not have done it. They deserved it. You didn't. But it is, but you did. The first clarity of God's judgment that it gives us, I think it reminds us of exactly what David said in Psalm 51, down around verses 7, 8, 9. Only against you, O Lord, have I sinned. The first clarity of God's judgment, I think, is reminding us that it's not against ourselves, it's not against anybody else, it's directly against Him. When He steps into judgment, He's not coming in as the OSHA inspector that had no part of any of this. He's coming in as the one that was directly wronged. He's not coming in like, God, what part do you have in it? God's been in the middle of it from the very beginning. And part of the issue with God's judgment is we remove God from the equation and then ask, what business does God have to be judging? He's the one and the only one that was wronged in the first place. Second thing that we notice comes out of the next couple of verses, 8 and following. You'll notice at the end of verse 9, for they brought evil on themselves. Verse 11, for what his hands have dealt out shall be done to him. Interestingly, it's the adverse of the golden rule. The Lord promises in His judgment, we will be judged, we will be treated as we have treated others. The clarity of God's judgment is something that we will either A, exercise ourselves when it comes to treating others and how we live, or we'll experience it from Him. God's judgment, it will either be the light that shines from Him through us to the world, and the world sees Him through us. So we will either exercise God's judgment in how we live and how we treat other people, or we'll step outside of it and we'll experience His judgment. So when we say, I'm going to serve this person in need, we're actually casting God's right judgment and letting His judgment flow through us onto that situation. Whenever we say, I'm not going to treat this person hatefully, or I'm not going to be belittling, or I'm not going to be demeaning, or I'm not going to take advantage of this person or situation for my own gain, that's actually us exercising God's good judgment. Everyday little moments, we carry out God's judgment. Not making us the judge, but us letting His judgment flow through us to the world so that they may see Him, His light shining through us to them, but we don't always do that. Sometimes we step outside of it and make judgments and make our own call, and it's in those moments that we step outside from exercising into the realm of experiencing God's judgment because we didn't live with it. We didn't live in sync with it. We stepped outside of it. And then the end of Isaiah 3 and into the beginning of chapter 4 shows us a dualistic kind of thing. It reminds us of God's authority, power, and control, and it reminds us of our humility. God's authority, power, and control, our humility. This is what was read for us in Scripture reading. God's authority, power, and control, clarity. The Lord has taken His place to contend. He stands to judge peoples. The Lord will enter into judgment with the elders and princes of His people. It is you who have devoured the vineyard, the spoil of the poor in your own houses. And He goes on to humble God's people who stepped outside of His judgment and started judging with their own judgment. So God's authority, power, and control, our humility. It's funny. People really want control until they've got it. People really want control until they've got it. Do you know how I know that? The group of naysayers to critique the way things are done is vast. Vast. But the group of people to step up and do it and actually make the decision to be critiqued is minimal. When it comes to control, I think we want the appearance of control, but we don't actually want the authority of control because that comes with a lot of pressure. We want the appearance of control when it comes to deciding where we're going to go out to eat, or which movie we're going to watch, outfit we're going to wear, channel we're going to change, cereal we're going to buy, which game we're going to go to. Which, keep in mind, we'd sit outside in the cold at that game very happily, but we'd sit in here and it'd be 62 degrees and think we're dying. We want the appearance of control. But the moment that we're actually given it, it's a whole lot of pressure and we really wish we didn't have it anymore. There's only one that you can save. Which one? We can either make this decision or that one, launch this attack or don't, but people are going to die either way. In the midst of being given actual control and actual authority, we're like, whoa, now, I'd like to draw the line at restaurants, cereal, and the channel changer. I don't actually want control. I want control in the hands of somebody that has no chance of messing up. Enter God taking His throne. The reason that we don't want control is we fear messing up. We fear making the wrong decision. In all reality, the beauty of us being humbled, God being exalted and given authority, is He's never going to make the wrong choice. He's never going to judge wrongly. And the beautiful part of Isaiah chapter 4, one of the shortest, if not the shortest chapters in the book of Isaiah, is it frames God's judgment as a gift to God's people. And here's how it does it. Starting in verse 2. In that day the branch, John 15:5, the branch of the Lord shall be beautiful and glorious, and the fruit of the land shall be the pride and the honor of the survivors of Israel. And he who is left in Zion and remains in Jerusalem will be called holy. Everyone who has been recorded for life in Jerusalem, when the Lord shall have washed away the filth of the daughters of Zion and cleansed the bloodstains of Jerusalem from its midst by a spirit of judgment. Do you notice? Washed away, cleansed by a spirit of judgment. By a spirit of judgment. And by a spirit of burning or purifying. Then the Lord will create over the whole side of Mount Zion and over her assemblies a cloud by day and smoke and the shining of a flaming fire by night. For over all the glory there will be a canopy. Cloud by day, fire by night, children of Israel in the wilderness, God's presence. There will be a booth for shade by day from the heat, and for a refuge and a shelter from the storm and the rain. You want to know the major difference and the main difference? The two main differences. The two main differences between here and between heaven. Presence of sin and absence of God. The judgment of God takes care of the second one to lead us to the first one. The judgment of God wipes away the presence of sin that we can enter into the presence of God. That's what the judgment of God does for God's people. It doesn't create panic. It doesn't create chaos. It doesn't throw us into a tailspin. It gives us a clarity of what truly is heaven, an existence with God in the absence of sin. And God's judgment is just simply what leads us to that. Simply what leads us to that. We come back to where we began. Chaos or clarity? Chaos, clarity. We come back to where we began of the response. I hope, I pray that we can get to a place where when we think of God's judgment and talk about God's judgment, that it's not something that boils up chaos or worry or past hurt or hard feelings, because I understand that the judgment of God has been misused, abused, and weaponized far more often than it should have been, but can get and grow to a place where it gives us clarity about what truly matters. But do you know part of the gap in that? It was, so I told you, let's see, I was at the Piggly Wiggly last 2 Mondays ago. They were talking about bread. It was the Thursday evening. It was the Thursday evening before all of this mess. And I was trying to get everything situated, preparing for the storm. And so I was out. I was prepped. I was already in my coveralls. Somebody, I won't say who, brought us supper. Thank you if you're watching. And they saw me in my coveralls. And you know what they said? They said, look who's prepared. Look who's prepared. Was I prepared? Well, yeah, you had your coveralls on. I guess this would have been a good time. Man, I should have worn them this morning. Would I have been prepared wearing coveralls? Well, yeah, of course. You're prepared. You're dressed. Okay? What if I came out of that door, I had on my coveralls, and I was carrying a full propane tank, like the ones that Jacob and Russell ran all over this county for about 5 days for people that didn't have heat. Am I prepared? Well, yeah, you now got coveralls and you got a propane tank to be heated with. Okay? What if I came out with both of those things, and I came out with an armload from my basement of canned goods? Let's say I had a Roger, Mary, Joe, Kathy basement just full of canned food. Well, of course, now you're really prepared, because you've got the attire, you've got the fuel, you've got the food. Okay? Come out again. We can go for days. Come out again. I've got my corn scoop, because who in Tennessee actually has a snow shovel? I judge you if you actually have a snow shovel. I have a corn scoop, and I have a spade shovel that I've kind of wore the tip off of from scraping it on the driveway so many times with snow, right? Then am I prepared? Well, of course. Okay, I was prepared, this first one. I'm also prepared with the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth. I'm prepared over here too. What's the difference? What's the difference in prepared? There is a direct correlation between the level of prepared and the response scale, chaos to clarity. There is a direct correlation between the people unprepared, losing their minds on social media, and the people like our grandparents that didn't sell their kerosene heater at $5 for any yard sale. That did live and grow up and experience and know exactly what to do because they were raised in it. There's a difference in the response, clarity or chaos, and in the level of prepared. And when I ask you, the reason we list all that, don't make it that, don't simplify it. Don't be so simple. When I say, are you prepared? Don't let the response be, oh yeah, I've been baptized and saved. Yeah. It's not what I asked. Not what I asked. Are we prepared? There's a path we walk in this life that draws us closer to the presence of God here to be more and most prepared for the presence of God there. It's important to begin our relationship with Him, but beginning our relationship with Him is not the fullness of preparedness. It's the beginning of preparedness. And each day walks us one step closer to that. Chaos or clarity, what is our response to God's judgment? I assure you our response says more about us than it does about Him and His Word. And can we grow to a place where it's clarity this morning? If we can help you in any way, let's do it. Let's pray. Let's start that path, start that walk if we need to as we stand and as we sing.
things in life that we all, most always take for granted, such as electricity, a lot of things that we probably just take for granted every day. We pray, Father, that you would go with us as we leave here today. Watch over us, care for us, and be with us